Hello there guys and welcome to Mad Doc Minis. In this video I'm going to be converting these Primaris Desolators into something that I don't mind looking at. Really going to need to do something about those weapons. They just look wrong and awkward to me personally. So first of all I build up the Desolators to this level, putting the torso and the legs together exactly as they're supposed to go. No conversion work required here. I do use some components from the 40k Devastators kit, namely the missile launchers. Now I had some of these lying around, I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well, but if you don't have any they're quite easy to get hold of and quite cheap on eBay. So I build up the missile launcher to this level, putting the muzzle on like so, and that's going to need some conversion work itself. So that handle on top is going to need to go, and also the whole thing is going to need to be smoothed down on top, and you'll see why later on in the conversion video. So first of all, snip snip goes the handle. And then with a little bit of extra care, I trim down the bit on the muzzle that is sitting proud. I just used hobby snips mainly for this and tied it up afterwards with a sharp knife, but whatever you do, just go careful and don't cut yourself. There's some bits along the length of the barrel that you need to trim down as well, if you want a nice smooth flat surface, like I do for this conversion. And remember, go carefully and slowly because you can't put on what you've taken off very easily. Now you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this. Nice and smooth, no sticky up bits on top. Nice. Now next up we take the Desolator's weapon, or at least this component here, and we need to modify that. We're going to need to chop it down quite significantly just underneath those see-through slits. The slits themselves need to be maintained, so you're going to need to come underneath those. Just go carefully, it's a delicate component and it will bend and warp and twist a little bit as you cut it, which is fine, but just take your time and try not to break it. Now, as a rough version of what you're after, you should end up with a kind of rail type component that looks a bit like this. Now that needs to be tidied up on the bottom a little bit more, so a sharp knife will do the trick. As a more refined version of what you're after, it should look like this. Nice and neat, nice and tidy. Put that to one side for a second, and that's going to get glued on at another time. Next up, take the Castellan launcher, or at least the muzzle of the launcher, here, and that's going to get glued on to the front of the missile launcher. Now these two components were made for each other. Now check this out guys, exactly the same size. Look at that, great. Isn't it wonderful when things just work? Now pay attention to alignment and you should end up with something that looks really natural. Look at that, just looks like it's meant to be there, and it's also satisfying WYSIWYG, so it's quite important to a lot of you gamers out there. We're not losing the Castellan in the process of this conversion. So next up, it's time to glue that rail that we made on top of the missile launcher. You can see I've cut the back end down a little bit on a diagonal. That's just to make it look a bit better, a bit more natural. And I just did that with hobby snips. Now take care and get it nice and straight. If it's not straight, if it's off on a little bit of an angle, it will tend to draw the eye. It's an easy thing to get wrong, but it's also an easy thing to get right. So do take your time, guys. You'll also note that I've used super glue throughout this build. You'd be well advised to use plastic cement instead. That's a personal preference of mine, a long-running preference. It isn't about to change anytime soon. But plastic cement will probably have the edge because it will help to fill in some of the gaps. It will fuse the plastic together nicely. Now you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this, okay? And at this stage, I'm just going to do a bit of a dry fit of the Desolator weapons on top. So these are the super crack missiles. These are the ones I'm actually going to go for because I think they look better, and I'm going for aesthetics rather than game performance. But I think they look really, really good. And I will give you an idea also of what the super frag missiles look like as well. So that's the super crack missiles. Super frag missiles, which are a little bit smaller and have a different shape, look a bit like this. There you go. I will do another comparison later on in the build as well, just so you can get a better idea of the completed models. All right. So you could magnetize if you wanted to. I don't tend to do that these days, but it's it's something you could do if you wanted to swap them out. So next up, we're going to glue the missile launcher onto the side of the Marine here. The missile launcher arm should go on with no problems at all, really. The supporting arm is a bit different. Remember, the Primaris physique is bigger than Firstborn, so you're going to need to kind of alter the way you do that a little bit. I found the best way for the supporting arm to go on was to glue the hand on the side of the missile launcher correctly as it's supposed to go, and then just let the shoulder fall where it may. And that will mean there'll be a little bit of an awkward looking gap at the rear end of the shoulder, and that's fine. Don't worry about that. We're going to sort it out. Now, I think the proportion of the arms looks absolutely fine here. I don't know what your thoughts are, guys, but you'll see that gap at the back there that you end up with, and that's going to get hidden. Don't worry about it. I promise it's going to look fine. In fact, let's do that next. Let's put our pauldron on, and you'll see what I mean. It's very, very forgiving. A little bit of glue, on goes the pauldron, and it's like it never happened. Look at that. No problem at all. So that's looking really, really good, and has hidden that funny little gap. Excellent. Now, what about the other components? Head and backpack need to get put on as well. I like to tilt the head slightly like it's looking through the targeter. I just think it's nice and characterful, but of course you do whatever you want to and use whatever heads and helmets you want to as well. I'm sticking to Primaris here. The backpack needs to go on as well. You may need to make some light modifications to the launcher and or the backpack to make that work. Sometimes they clash a bit at the back. Make a little cut where you need to, and on that goes. Looking a bit more complete. Now I'll do another comparison here so you can get a better idea of the completed model. On goes the super crack missiles first, the ones I'm going to use. And then we'll do a comparison with the super frag missiles. There we are. There's both variants for you so you can get an idea of what this might look like with both. It's time though to glue on my chosen missiles. So on go the super crack missiles, a little bit of glue along the length of the rail there. And I'm just going to take a little bit of attention and get that nice and straight and lined up. Looking good. Okay, we just need to think a little bit about the Castellan launcher and its magazine. Now for this I just kind of snip it up and stick it on, basically no finesse. So I cut the magazine down, take the ammo feed off, you're not going to need that, and just cut it down. I don't do any filling or any refinement. This is really rough and ready, guys, and that's just to give some representation to that Castellan launcher really, and that gets glued onto the side of the missile launcher with a little bit of cutting and modification. Now, if you've enjoyed the content, please consider liking and sharing. It really does help the channel to grow. And if you're not already subscribed, consider giving me a sub. It really, really all does help. And I do appreciate all the support, guys. So let's have a closer look at these things on a rotating platform. You'll notice, guys, that I've given them a very basic tabletop standard paint job here. Don't look for perfection. You're not going to see it from me at all with painting. But this is my homebrew chapter colours. And I'm quite happy with how they turned out. You'll notice that I've used the pistol holsters on the hip just to hide the ugly attachment point for the Castellan launcher magazine. That's where it would normally go. So that was a nice low-tech way of hiding that. And I haven't bothered to fill in any gaps or anything like that. So if you wanted a better miniature, you could definitely, get a more refined result than what I've done here. But I hope it gives you some food for thought. I'd love to see whatever you guys done with your desolators. So send me any photos if you've done your own conversions. I'd love to see what's going on with your stuff, guys. But let me know what you think about mine. And I do feel sorry for the designers. I think they were probably given a rubbish brief, like make heavy weapons marines that don't look like Devastators. That's probably their brief, and you got to feel sorry for them sometimes. But yeah, God, what a clanger. Never mind. I hope you think these look a little bit better. I do. And please let me know what you do think. And I will catch you in another video soon. Hope you enjoyed, guys, and take care.